How's everybody doing? Thanks for joining. So happy to be able to spend some time with each of you. Would love for you to go through introductions, your name, how long you've been in TA role, and then at LinkedIn, we always start with something that's not on your LinkedIn profile. So if you could say something like that in about 60 to 90 seconds. Your whole life story in 90 seconds.
Yes.
Go.
Hi everyone, Cynthia Cohen. As you know, most of you know, I am from Argentina, South America. So I'm bringing the LATAM perspective into this session. I am trilingual, so that's on my LinkedIn profile. But anyway, I've been in RPO since 2009, so part of the founders of Kenexa in South America, and then opened up my company, and here I am. I am the mother of 3 beautiful daughters, who 2 of them are sick right now in Buenos Aires. Lucky me, that's why I'm not supposed to be here, right? And I love to play tennis. That's one of my hobbies.
Hi everyone, this is working perfectly. I'm Shalina Shahid. I am from NES Faircroft. I'm the Managing Director for our Baker Hughes account, which is our flagship account within the Managed Solutions arm of NES Faircroft. I've been in talent acquisition for about 17 years now, and most of that period has been in RPO, predominantly in energy, and within energy, oil and gas, which every day is becoming a little bit more and more taboo. But the great thing about oil and gas is that it takes you all around the world. So my career has been in Asia Pacific. I'm originally from Singapore. I know you can't tell from that accent. And my early career was in Australia as well. And now I live in Houston, but prior to this, I was in the Middle East, in Dubai, for 5.5 years. And all this travel has been great in lending me first-hand perspective and relatability when I'm running my teams and working with our clients across the world. You know, we have teams in Europe, Middle East, Africa, Asia Pacific, and North America as well. And if you can't already tell, even though it's not in my LinkedIn, I love to travel. It's not a passion I share with my husband. And when our daughter was born, he was dismayed to see that the travel bug did not let up at all. So by the time our daughter was 2, she'd been to 9 different countries. And now she's 4, whenever people ask her, "Where are you from?" She looks at them like they're crazy and she says, "Everywhere." And I love that. I hope someday that's what everyone says to that question, right?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kelly Burlage. Thanks for having me here today. I've been in the TA space for 20 plus years, which is actually kind of shocking to say. Lots of familiar faces in the room that I've worked with and for, and so it's fun to kind of bring things full circle. My role is Global Vice President of Talent Acquisition with Lineage Logistics. We are, as I share with Ben Eubanks all the time, the biggest company no one knows about. If you have eaten food that has been refrigerated, it has, God bless you, it has come from Lineage. I've been with the organization for just a little over a year, and global responsibility is a fun job. I have responsibility for 22 different countries, and on average we do about 10 to 15, this year about 20,000 hires per year. So very excited to kick things off and learn from everyone today.
And what's on
my
your,
fun fact.
You weren't getting out of it.
Not getting out of it. I actually started this year with a new mindset of being bold, which is one of our Lineage values, and trying things I didn't like and I didn't enjoy, which started the year with doing the polar plunge. So I'm going to continue trying things that I don't like and being bold.
That was pretty bold. That was a good start.
Awful. I hated every second of it.
Okay. I was wondering. All right. So my name's Jenny Dede. I do lead the sales team at LinkedIn that supports our search and staffing customers. New role for me, just started about 3 years ago. I've been at LinkedIn for 6 years and led our global post sales team, customer success. But before that, I spent about a lot of years in different various roles, predominantly in RPO, but also spent time in direct hire and VMS and all of that. So very happy to be back in search and staffing. It's been a great couple of months so far. All right, so something not on my LinkedIn profile. I hate the question. I always ask it and I hate it. But I'll start with Halloween is here, and that is my absolute favorite holiday. My house is overly decorated, ridiculously crazy over the top, that I had to throw a party to make sure that people could see all of the decorations that I wasted so much money on. So that'll be my fun fact. I love to dress up. I love costumes. All right, question 1. Considering the headwinds that we are hearing about a possible recession, how can companies shift their TA strategies to weather any potential downfall? Kelly, let's start with you.
Well, when everyone was talking earlier today, I was laughing because it was giving me a bit of PTSD because we've all experienced the shortages, the ghosting. I think the best advice that I can say is TA is about being resilient and being creative. And while we really want to focus on, do you have the right people focused on the right process, leveraging the right technology, there's a fair bit of creativity that needs to happen. There's no silver bullet answer. And if you aren't pushing out a creative solution, when these headwinds hit, you're going to be left in a really yucky position. So having a differentiated global recruitment strategy is key in order to persevere, I guess.
So are you moving roles around, like roles that you would hire in the U.S., you would now consider moving someplace else?
100%. So internal mobility has been a big one for us. We've also instituted second chance hiring, which someone talked about earlier. We've invested in a U.S.-based refugee program that's been incredibly effective for some of our key locations. To put it in perspective, 80% of the hires that we do is in that transportation warehousing space. Unfortunately, we see really high turnover in those locations. So big for us is just trying everything and sticking with it. But it does require a really creative approach. So things like refugee, second chance hiring, and not just leveraging technology. So boots on the ground. What are you doing to build relationships with the community? What's your EVP? How can you enhance that? Why do people want to work for you? Because we are a very large company that no one knows about. So what is in it for them? Wages and things of that nature, but also career growth and career ladders, and how we articulate that to the community.
That's great.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, this is great. Shalina.
So one of the things, as Kelly has said, is looking at where are those best cost opportunities. Talent is across the world, and one of the upsides, the biggest upsides coming out of COVID is the remote working gave us access to that talent without borders. But there's been a cost, hasn't there? That engagement has dropped off. We ramped up our teams over the last couple of years, and we have all these new people that's not been absorbing our culture. The learning by osmosis has really slowed down, and the organic collaboration has slowed down as well. So what do we need to do to still drive efficiencies, but bring up the human element of what we do, and working with our clients to embody the same, helping them establish, where is the best cost location going to be, but not lose out on the quality of what they're trying to deliver out to the markets, and still drive that engagement in person. And one of the areas that we've been looking at as well is bringing in the talent early. So within our organization, we've really invested in our associates program and working with our clients on there as well. And maybe looking at bringing people in, with the backgrounds and the qualifications that they wouldn't have had looked at previously. I think TTX talked about it as well, where before we were looking only with degrees or associate degrees, but now it's about what life experiences do they have as well, what are their motivators, and putting them in places that we won't typically have looked at in the past. I mean, a perfect example is Egypt. Mere 4 or 5 years ago, we would only hire people in Egypt to work for Egypt. But now our team in Egypt covers the world. The quality of the people there, when you actually look for it, when you invest in the time in training them and upskilling them and imparting the knowledge, you get so much back, and that's how we're going to weather the storm through this recession when it does come.
So when we had initially this conversation, right, on our call, I was like, which recession? Where? Oh, the one in the US. Okay, so the one in the US affects South America, the one in China affects South America, the one in Australia affects South America. We are used to live in a recession. It's a permanent situation. That's why Latin America people are always open to remote, to crypto, to what can you offer? I mean, I'm not kidding. I mean, in my personal situation, I like to say that my second name is flexibility. There is no other way to live in South America if you are not flexible. So when it comes to what can we do as a global TA people, just open your eyes to hire internationally, to think about that. I mean, we are used to be and to work with this kind of crisis. We as Latinos, and I really want to say that, I mean, yes, there is a crisis happening or coming to the US, but I mean, maybe if you open up and you explore other opportunities, you will see that people will use to come here if it's needed, or to work abroad if you need it. So, yeah, I don't know, just be open and flexible.
One thing I wanted to follow up on that, Shalina, you said around onboarding. So LinkedIn used to have a very in-office culture. You weren't really allowed to work remote, and clearly that's not the case now. But what we're finding is people are having a very hard time ramping at the speeds that they were, performing at the same levels. Earlier this summer, we actually brought everybody through an onboarding process. So every employee had to reconnect to our culture, our values, to help people understand the magic that was, obviously pre-pandemic. While different, we still want people to feel connected to that. So just another idea. I think that's really important for people to feel connected, or they would be more willing, obviously, to go take another offer. So all really great ideas and perspectives. Thank you. Should have said in the beginning, the panel is going to cover a couple of different topics just to make sure we can kind of cover many things, and we can take questions at the end too. So I'm going to pivot a little bit over into DEI. And so Kelly, would love to hear where Lineage is on their DEI journey.
Sure. I think as with most companies, we are on a journey. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. We want to be thoughtful about our approach. I think first and foremost, we started with setting realistic goals and expectations and leveraging data and benchmark data to figure out where are we? What does this look like for us? How do we want to break this up? Where do we want to be within the industry in terms of, do we want to be a trendsetter? Do we want to be innovative? Of course. So how do we back into goals that are realistic, that we can then back into with whether it be a comprehensive recruiting strategy? We've recently rolled out 5 different employment resource groups. One of those centered around women in lineage leadership, really women supporting women in leadership roles. As you know, the transportation logistics industry does not have a lot of women. So we're trying to look for not only diversity from one angle, but all angles in terms of how we can inject a different viewpoint in. We're also focusing on, I point to my friend, but Latinx. We're also focused on African ancestry. We're also focused on military and veteran communities and bringing those together to help us make sure we're all holding ourselves accountable. I think the biggest thing about our DE&I approach is this isn't an agenda. It's really woven into our DNA as a company. So we talk about how do you get buy-in from an organizational standpoint. It comes from all layers in the organization, woven into every conversation we have, whether it be interviewing, whether it be new board director appointments, whether it be how we interview, removing the bias in interview hiring, and just saying it, being comfortable with words like white privilege. Having open fireside conversations about how do we unpack this so we can get to a better place as a company. So I think we recognize that we all have a lot of work to do to improve it, and I think the goals will help us get there and hold each other accountable.
Really like the angle of not only in the recruiting piece, but then also the inclusivity once you're there and having those tougher conversations about the language we use and how having more difficult conversations. I think that's really important. Cynthia, what does DEI look like in LATAM?
Where?
Okay, you pick.
I'm just being challenging. The only country in LATAM that has quota is Brazil. It's the only country where the government sets a quota for diversity. Now, what's diversity in Brazil? The Black communities, women, and disabled, I would say. Now, the rest of the countries, they don't have a quota. I mean, there is no such a thing about hitting X percentage of minorities. Why? I think that we have other things to occupy our time before, to be honest with you. Now, I told a story in the morning while we were having breakfast about a company. One of my clients, they wanted to have a diversity number in Brazil, and so they hired someone, a blinded person. They weren't ready to have a blinding person in the office. But before that, they weren't ready for that person to sign the contract. So there was no one in the office that could tell what to do for that person to be able to be welcome in the company. So they recommended that future employee to bring on a family, a friend, someone that can read the contract. Interesting, right? So what I'm saying is diversity is crucial, but we need to make sure to understand which are the minorities that we want to attack in each country.
So my question for you is, how can RPOs support their clients in the DEI journey?
So I think the role of the RPO is really to be the bridge between what our clients' DEI goals and objectives are and market realities. And not just be the bridge to say, oh, this is what the market reality is, but then really take their goals and objectives using what we know that the market is saying and help them come up with actionable items, real pragmatic steps that they can take to achieve those goals. And that's not an easy thing to do. There's going to be some hard truth moments, right? You're going to be telling your client, I know you think you're going to want that and this is how it should be, but it's not going to work quite like this, right? And with that, it's also making sure that they understand that the markets are dynamic. I think very often our clients come up with goals that maybe were set in HQ and expect that to roll out all over the world. So, with my client, for example, their head office is in the US, and they say, okay, we're going to want our senior female representation to be at 30%. Well, that's great, but 4 or 5 years ago in Saudi Arabia, they didn't have female toilets in the offices. How are you supposed to have a population that's ready to take on leadership roles when they couldn't even have a place in the office just that many years ago? So it's taking this understanding of what the market says and working with them on a strategy to say, okay, great, we can get there, but it's not going to be a one-stop shop approach where you're going to have female leaders all over the world, you're going to have minorities in leadership positions all over the world, but you have to start somewhere. Right, to start in your graduate program, start in your internship program, go out to the schools. Let's look at what the future looks like and put in steps in place today so that you're actually going to achieve that.
I love that. Last night at dinner, and I'm going to, Jaquise, is that how you pronounce it? Jaquise, okay. We were talking about diversity and maturity and the work that she's doing around that, and I thought that was such a great idea and way to partner with our customers or any customers, because you can either try to boil the ocean or really do what you can measure. I think both of those stories are they're just so relevant for where we are right now that we really need to be targeted on the approach as opposed to trying to do 12 things not great, focus on the things that are most important. I think that's awesome. Any lessons learned, things that have gone well, maybe not well in the DEI space that you'd like to share with the group? For anybody.
I think one of the things you spoke about is maturity, right? Mm-hmm. And in the US, the equal rights passed in the Senate, 50 years ago? Mm-hmm. This has been a topic of conversation in this part of the world for over 50 years. But Cynthia just said, in Latin America, they got other things to worry about right now, than bringing more inclusivity into the workplace. And it's really taking that knowledge to say, okay, this is going to work in certain locations, but in other areas, look at what's driving those communities, look at what their factors are, and use that to help your clients make decisions. One of the things that I mentioned about Saudi Arabia, but right now, even in oil and gas, there's still a lot of rigs out there that aren't fitted to support females, to support people who are non-binary, etc., into those places. So making sure that your clients have very localized strategies, not just local down to the region, not just local down to the country, but even local down to the actual facility. Great, you want to bring a blind person on board. What have you done to make sure that your facility can actually accommodate these differing needs? It's been a huge lesson to learn. They're like, great, we've come up with this idea. It's been signed off. It looks great to our shareholders. It looks great on our website. It looks great to market. How are you going to make it work? How are you going to make sure that these employees are going to be supported in their very, very diverse needs and bring the value that you wanted them to bring to your organization?
Yeah, please.
This may be a simple answer, but one thing we've done that's been a little different is really, we talk about removing the bias in hiring, and we've done competency-based interview guides where you're removing the person's name and you're giving everybody on the interview team an opportunity to weigh in with certain weightings and scores based on your values, based on competencies relevant to the position. It allows for a very open, honest dialogue about the key things that you're looking for and removing, that gut feeling that we all get when we interview someone, and really focusing on what's necessary for someone to be successful in the job and less about the person, which is just one small step, but I think a mini victory. So,
great. Thank you for sharing. Anything you want to add?
Into diversity, I will add the empathy. I think that's something that it's not really in the recruiting, right? Because we talk about empathy, but it's empathy when we recruit. It's the empathy when we actually have the employees already in the company. What is that we do to, for example, make sure that we reach out to our fellow Mexicans after the earthquake, or we make sure to understand what's going on in Florida with, with Ian, and just make sure that we are diverse, not only in recruiting, but in really understanding what's going on in other parts of the world.
I can share two things from LinkedIn on the DEI side. So I would say the first thing is measuring and communicating often. So I think whenever our senior leaders are talking to our employees, DEI is always front and center, and it can't just be like, hey, it's a focus without any real context behind it. And so I think our leadership team has done a really nice job of putting some meat and stories behind the effort that's going into the results. And then secondly, around accountability, so our director plus population in the sales organization is all responsible for nurturing talent. So there's a certain amount of people we have to add into our pipeline. There's expectations of keeping those leads warm. So that way when there is roles open, specifically at the senior level, we can bring increased amount of representation into our group. And then the final thing I'll say, even though I said I'd only say two, is that we've done a lot of work around those hard conversations. That's why I kind of picked on that the last time. All of our leaders have gone through training around impact versus, or intent versus impact. So these are the words you say, and you may have intended to say this, but this was the impact it actually had. And I felt like that's been a really big game changer, eye-opener for leaders, for the language that they're using, how they're showing up. So those are just a couple of things that have really worked at LinkedIn. Switching topics very fast, even though that's, DEI is not a 5-minute conversation. Moving over to generational hiring. We're going to cover all the big ones in 5 minutes or less. All right, so multi-generational hiring. So Cynthia, I'm going to start with you. Can you share your experience in hiring across different generational groups?
I share with you an example that happened with Boomerang, which is like the monster in South America. So there was this huge ad on the highway that says, 2 people on their 20s saying, I want a job that adapts to my life. I don't want my life to be adapted to a job. Maybe you can say, pretty strong, right? Yes, but that's what the 2030 generation is looking for. Can we fight against that? Maybe. You won't get any results or positive results. Now, is that, and I heard this conversation happening with every single one of the speakers. So what I will say is ghosting, right? Why are people ghosting? Because the job, from the moment they are in the process, is not adapting to their life. Why? Because recruiters are not getting back to them, or recruiters are not responding fast enough. And fast is fast. So for example, when I support some of my clients in recruiting, I share my WhatsApp number. WhatsApp, it's pretty popular in LATAM. We don't do texting, okay? So the candidates are all the time with me, texting me. I'm like, yeah, sure, I'm here for you. So it's a question of really understanding and not wanting to change their minds, but helping hiring managers adapt to these new generations.
That's all right. We'll share, me and you. Yes. Okay. Shalina, as an RPO provider, what has been your experience with the same topic, obviously? Any differences globally or any key learnings that you can share?
Yeah, absolutely. So I bring the oil and gas energy perspective. Within oil and gas and energy to a certain extent, we went through the great crew change, which started in 2015 and has mostly played out into 2020. And what we thought was going to happen was the old timers that maybe we call it would leave, and then the younger people would come in. But this has not been an even balance around the world. And in fact, we still have quite a large older working population. You might be a little bit surprised to hear that in Japan, it's 15% that are over 65. That's the same in the US. They don't have a much larger older population. But then in New Zealand, that goes up to 25%. And then in South Korea, that's 35%. So you have a very varied mix of generations working in organizations, and they're all looking for different things. So in Saudi Arabia, always use Saudi Arabia. It's the busiest areas for us in the Middle East. And in China, the younger generation put a lot of emphasis on working in the public sectors. So they see the perks and the stability that come from the public sectors that the private just cannot compete with. But then the turnover in these public sectors is very low. So people don't leave, which means the mid-career, the senior opportunities don't come up. So then how are you going to attract people at that level looking for the mid-career, the more senior positions? And then when you come over to Europe and North America, the emerging generation, they want to work for organizations that mirror their own personal ethos. They're very aware of what the company's social missions are, and they're also aware about how the company is going to reflect their motivations with work-life balance, their place in society, etc. But then when you go to Asia Pacific, when you go to India, money talks across most of the generation, and so does prestige. So the problem that you have then when you've got global organizations and global clients is how do they then have a compelling EVP that's comprehensive but still speaks across all these different motivational drivers, right? But moving away from just the EVP, it's going to the individual hiring decision makers and making sure that when they're speaking to these candidates and they're assessing these candidates, that they're also aware of what these drivers are so that that attraction piece becomes a proactive part of that conversation.
I really like across all the topics that we talked about, it's not a one-size-fits-all. Like you definitely have to have a multi-pronged approach to just about anything that you're trying to solve, which has been pretty consistent. All right, well, I just want to say thank you to all three of you. I really appreciate you sharing your insights and your knowledge and your expertise. It's been really wonderful to share the chairs with you, not a stage, the chairs. So thanks.